Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mount Athos and Aquinas Fellowship. In this episode, I'll be engaging with the controversial topic of the uncreated light of Mount Tabor. For those of you who are not familiar with the controversy, the uncreated light dispute is centered around the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew 17. The question that has been disputed is whether the light that was seen by the apostles was created or uncreated. This controversy eventually reaches its apex at the time of St. Gregory Palamas and the hesychast dispute. So I guess the question someone may be asking themselves is, who cares if the light is created or uncreated? To which I respond with a quote from St. Thomas: "Unless you see the target, you cannot aim for it. If the light is created, then it's an imitation of God at best, and not God. Thus men can reduce that light to either intellectual gnosis or a mere symbol of knowledge. But if, on the other hand, this light is uncreated, then God has truly unveiled his glory. For what is the gospel if not the very words of St. Peter, which says that through Christ we become partakers of the divine nature?" So lest we be running a race towards something that is less than God, it's important that we come to clear grips as to what this light is. And surprisingly, Aquinas has more to say about this than many are aware of. But before I explicate the words of Thomas, it's only right that we first find clarity on what the Eastern Fathers have to say about this light. After laying out the Eastern minds, we'll also lay out some of the minds of the West for the sake of uniformity. So let's begin. As many of you are aware, the East is saturated with saints from the first 7 centuries that either implicitly or explicitly refer to the light of Mount Tabor. Given that there are so many, I think it's more beneficial to hone in on 3 major contributors for the sake of time and clarity, rather than to explicate all the alluded to texts. The saints from the East that we'll be looking at are Macarius of Egypt, John Chrysostom, and Maximus the Confessor. The first saint I'd like to reference is that great desert father, St. Macarius of Egypt. In the Pseudo-Macarius writings, we have him stating as follows, quote, "As the body of the Lord was glorified when he went up into the mountain, and was transfigured into the divine glory and into the infinite light, so are the bodies of the saints glorified and shine like lightning. The glory that was within Christ was outspread upon his body and shone." Close quote. Notice that Macarius is first speaking of a glory that is, as it were, hidden within the inner recesses of the soul. But at the transfiguration, the glory, quote, outspreads upon his body. This infinite light takes on a transitive nature, and as it were, hooks the body by the teeth of the soul. This way of expressing the transfiguration is not unique in the Eastern patrimony. John Damascene, following Maximus the Confessor, states that the soul mediates between God and the flesh. This way of thinking causes us to make a distinction between the soul as the direct contact of the divine nature and the body as the overflow recipient of the one hypostasis. More on this to come, but for now, let us return to a second saint from the East, John Chrysostom. John, unlike other Eastern fathers, shows a great deal of hesitancy in saying that this light beheld by the eyes is the same splendor that will be unveiled at the resurrection of the just. In his letter to Theodore, he states as follows, quote, "Let us behold him shining as he shone there. And yet even then he did not display to us all the splendor of the world to come. For that the vision was accommodated to human eyes, not an exact manifestation of the reality, is plain from the very words of the evangelist." Close quote. Chrysostom takes on more of a metaphorical approach to the light of Mount Tabor. Or, perhaps it's appropriate to say that Chrysostom sees the Mount of Transfiguration as a tempered foretaste of the eschaton. Either way you slice it, Chrysostom shows no allusion to seeing the light as a 1-to-1 ratio of what will be seen by the blessed. So far we have 2 saints before us. Macarius takes the view that the glory upon Mount Tabor is infinite in nature, and Chrysostom takes more of a tempered view. As we shall see in a bit, I believe both of their positions can be argued and harmonized. But for now, let us turn out to a third and arguably most noteworthy saint of the East on this matter, St. Maximus the Confessor. Maximus, unlike any saint before, doesn't look at the Mount of Transfiguration as a whole, but rather he breaks down the light into parts. In Maximus's earliest work, the Ambigua, he takes on a very nuanced position regarding the distinction between the light as seen in the face and the light that is characterized by the garment that Christ wore. About the face, Maximus states as follows, quote, "They were taught in a hidden way that the holy blessed radiance that shone with dazzling rays of light from the Lord's face, completely overwhelming the power of their eyes, was a symbol of his divinity, which transcends intellect, sensation, being, and knowledge." Close quote. We can see from this quote that Maximus posits the face shining in glory as a symbol of his divinity. But this isn't Maximus's concluding thought on the matter. On the contrary, he decides to revisit the Mount of Transfiguration one more time in his Ambigua. Continuing about the face of Christ, Maximus states as follows, quote, "The light of the Lord's face, which overcame the activity of human sense perception, formed within the blessed apostles the negative mode of mystical theology, according to which the blessed and holy Godhead, according to its essence, is beyond ineffability and unknowability, for it infinitely transcends all infinity." For Maximus, the face illumined as the sun shows forth the inaccessibility of the divine essence. He goes on to say that if the sun is such that one cannot gaze at it apart from any mediation, then how much more the divine essence? In Maximus's corpus of works, he only focuses on the face in 2 books that I'm aware of, namely the Ambigua, which we have already looked at, and his other work titled Doubts and Questions. Scholars would agree that even though the Ambigua is very important, yet it is the Doubts and Questions as a later work that show forth the more mature thought of the angelic saint. In this book he states as follows, quote, "The face of the Logos, which radiated like the sun, is the inaccessibility that characterizes his essence, upon which it is impossible to gaze by an interpretation of thoughts, just as neither can one gaze upon the brightness of the sun, even if someone has entirely purified his optical ability." Close quote. As we can see, Maximus comes to the conclusion that the face shining as the sun is a symbol of the divine essence. The essence is not gazed at by an interpretation of thought. As the sun places the pupil of the eye in complete darkness when it attempts to gaze upon it, even so, says Maximus, does the divine essence. Here ends Maximus's thoughts on the face of the Logos, which shined as the sun. Let us now turn to the garment and see what Maximus has to say about it. As we've already shown for Maximus, the face of the Logos is a radiance symbolizing the essence of unknowability by an interpretation of thought. So what does Maximus think about the garment? The garment, in Maximus's eyes, are symbolic of God as he is known in creation. He goes on to say, quote, "The body of the Logos, therefore, is the essence of the virtues, such as goodness, meekness, and such things, which elsewhere Maximus calls the energies. In the robes of the Logos are the words of Scripture, in the creation of the world that has been put forward and received from God. From the greatness of its beauty, they reason analogically about its creator." Though I am tempted to veer off into a discussion about Aquinas and Maximus's Analogia Intis, I will table that for now and focus on the topic at hand. Returning back to our topic, we can see from Maximus's words that the body of the Logos is reflective of the activities that Maximus identifies as energies elsewhere in the same book. And the garment is reflective of God known analogously in creation. To make this point even clearer, let's compare Maximus's words from Questions and Doubts to his words in the Ambigua. In Maximus's Ambigua, he states as follows, quote, "The same light also formed within the apostles the affirmative mode of theology, which is divided into modes concerned with activity, providence, and judgment. The mode concerned with activity is grounded in the beauty and magnificence of creation, and indicates that God is the creator of everything, which is evident in the brightly shining garments of the Lord, which our discourse has already established as signifying the visible objects of creation." Close quote. What this text shows is that for Maximus, the garment is characteristic of God revealing himself to a certain extent in creation. but he is very careful to affirm that the face of the Logos, by which the light is emanating, is completely untouched by all creatures. In a sense, creation discloses that he is, but not what he is. That he is provident, that he is wise, that he is just, can be seen from the things that are made. But what cannot be seen by an interpretation of thought is the divine essence. Here closes our investigation of saints from the East. Now we will turn to the Western saints to see where agreements and disagreements can be found. In this section of the video, we will be going over the works of Augustine, Ambrose, and Pope Leo the Great. Let us begin by looking at St. Augustine. For Augustine, though he mentions the Transfiguration in the corpus of his work, he does not explicitly speak about the light of Christ's face. However, if one does a careful investigation of St. Augustine's works, they will find that Augustine rejects any kind of vision of God that involves bodily sight with bodily eyes. In his letter to Italica, he states as follows, quote, "Let the flesh raving with carnal imaginations hear these words. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. If this be the manner of worshiping him, how much more of seeing him? For who dare affirm that the divine essence is seen in a corporal manner, when he has not permitted it to be worshipped in a corporal manner?" For Augustine, there is no light that is not the divine essence. Hence, seeing the essence is seeing light. To show this even more, he says elsewhere, quote, "But this, the bodily eye neither now is, nor shall then be able to see. For everything which can be seen by the bodily eye must be in some place, nor can be everywhere in its totality, but with a smaller part of itself occupies a smaller space, and with a larger part of a larger space. It is not so with God, who is invisible and incorruptible, who only has immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man has seen nor can see. For he cannot be seen by men through the bodily organ by which men see corporeal things. For if he were inaccessible to the minds also of the saints, it would not be said, they looked unto him and were enlightened." Close quote. Thus, the doctrine of the West is absolutely clear. God cannot be seen by the bodily eyes of human beings. However, Augustine does believe that the glory of God can be seen by the eyes of the heart, as it were. To no one's surprise, anyone who loves Augustine is going to find similarities with Ambrose, his teacher. In Ambrose's commentary on the Gospel of Luke, we find as follows, quote, "Father, I will also that they whom you have given me may be with me where I am. But if he had thought that the Father would give the divine throne to men, he would have said, I will that where I sit, they also may sit with me. But he says, I will that they may be with me, not that they may sit with me. And where I am, not as I am. Then follows the words, that they may see my glory. Here too he did not say, that they may have my glory, but that they may see it. For the servant sees, the Lord possesses. As David also has taught us, saying, that I may see the delight of the Lord. And the Lord himself in the gospel has revealed it, stating, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Close quote. This passage I find to be very interesting. For starters, Ambrose is rejecting a participation in this particular glory spoken of here. Rather than participating in it, Ambrose states that the pure in heart shall see it. See it, as he says, is not the same as possessing it. Only the Lord possesses this particular glory. However, there is a glory that Ambrose says belongs to Christ and the people participate in. This glory is that which makes us go from glory to glory. To show that Ambrose makes a distinction between glories, one only has to look to his commentary on John 17, where he states as follows, quote, Consider the whole of this passage and see from what standpoint he speaks. For you hear him saying, Father, glorify me with the glory which I had with you before the world was. See how he speaks from the standpoint of the first man? For he begs for us in that request for those things which, as man, he remembered were granted in paradise before the fall, as also he spoke of it to the thief at his passion. Verily, verily, I say unto you, today shall ye be with me in paradise. This is the glory before the world was. But he used the word world instead men, as also you have it, lo, the whole world goes after him. And again, that the world may know that you have sent me. Close quote. Notice Ambrose's unique reading of John 17:5, which posits the glory spoken of before the world as the glory of Adam, prior to his fall from paradise. Of this glory, Ambrose is quick to speak of a participated by the creature. And yet for Ambrose, there is a glory that belongs to the Trinity which will not be possessed by the faithful, and yet will be seen. I believe this is the glory Augustine calls the vision of the divine essence, which is seen not with human eyes, but the eyes of the heart. Thus there is a twofold glory, the one glory not of participation and not accessible to human bodily eyes. The other glory is both accessible to human bodily eyes and participated in. And to show that this is not unique to Augustine and Ambrose, one only needs to turn to Pope Leo the Great. Pope Leo the Great, commenting on the Transfiguration, states as follows, quote, "For the unspeakable and unapproachable vision of the Godhead itself, which is reserved till eternal life for the pure in heart, they could in no wise look upon and see while still surrounded with mortal flesh. The Lord therefore displays his glory before chosen witnesses, and invests that bodily shape which he shared with others with such splendor that his face was like the sun's brightness and his garments equaled the whiteness of snow." Close quote. Here Pope Leo makes a clear, undeniable distinction. Distinction number one: whatever vision is promised in the eschaton is not what was seen on the mountain by the apostles. Distinction number two: whatever is seen is called the glory of the Lord. In conclusion, Leo is stating that God's glory was both seen and not seen. Augustine, Ambrose, and Leo all affirm a sight with bodily eyes and a sight with the eyes of the heart. Let us now see if we can reconcile the East and the West Fathers before we see what Aquinas has to say on the matter. In this video, I have demonstrated that first of all, the opinions about the Mount of Transfiguration are diverse and extremely complex. We have everything from a symbol to an infinite light. But if Maximus is held in the highest regard in the East, then the West has gained an ally in its argumentation. For Augustine, Ambrose, and Leo both affirm two things. First, there is a glory that is perceived by bodily eyes. Second, there is a glory that transcends all bodily eyes and is seen only intuitively. This glory is not participated in, as Ambrose clearly states. Now Maximus, drawing a distinction between the inaccessible essence and the glory of God seen in the garment, as in the creature, seems to be in great conformity with the minds of the West. Both Augustine and Leo the Great call the garment of Christ the church in glory. And the face of Christ is the essence of God, which is beheld by the just in the eschaton. It's only right that if Christ's face shines with the light of the inaccessible essence, then the trajectory of the church is towards his sight. For it is written, "We do not seek your hands, but we only seek your face." Now that we have laid out the blazed path by the Fathers, I think it's only right to see how the path squares up with Aquinas. For Aquinas, the Mount of Transfiguration is the aim or trajectory of the Christian life. Here Christ feeds his people with the light of life and satisfies the hungry soul longing for the infinite. The soul entering into the holiest place, where the high priest took the blood and not the body, by the beatific vision sees the uncreated essence of God. This side of the glory of the Son transfigures the immaterial soul, which Maximus calls a mediator between God and flesh. The soul then retakes possession of the body, and unfolds the light of glory upon it in a mode in which it can be received. This light Thomas calls the gift of clarity. This light, as seen in the glorified body, discloses the intimate union between the soul and God. The flesh, rejoicing in the union with the glorified intellect, radiates a light that is both called glory and seen. That this light is seen is clear from the words of Jesus. To the scribes and Pharisees he says, "You shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds in glory." Of this glory the righteous will participate, and the unjust will see, even with their bodily eyes. For behold, every eye shall see him. But the wicked will not rise in the glory that is seen, and since the glory seen is dependent upon the glory unseen. For Aquinas, like the Western Fathers, there are two glories. The first and foremost is the glory of the beatific vision. This glory nobody will see apart from grace. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The second glory is that which redounds to the creature in virtue of the uncreated glory. This is the glorified body which takes on a likeness, according to its own mode of receiving, of the eternal glory. The unjust will see those glorified in the effect of the uncreated glory unveiled throughout creation, but will not see the beatific vision, as Isaiah has said, quote, "The wicked will be taken away and will not see the glory of the Lord." Close quote. Simply summarize, Aquinas, following the Fathers, believes in two glories. One hinges on the other. One that only the righteous will see and not possess, since nothing is assumed into the divine essence. The second, all will see and only the righteous will possess, namely the gift of clarity, which is hierarchically distinct in each saint according to the quality of their charity, and is an eternal gift redounding to the body from the gaze at eternal life intuitively. Now for Gregory Palamas, the difficulty rises to a new level. So instead of comparing his view with Aquinas in this video, I will instead save that for a different video where I'll pick apart his dialogue with the Barlamite and his triads. I think many will be surprised to see just how much him and Aquinas are in conformity. More on this to come in another video. So then, the listener is asking, the question still remains to be answered. Is the light of Mount Tabor created or uncreated? Well, speculatively, given what I presented, I think it's not entirely incorrect to say that the light is both created and uncreated. Uncreated as to its very source and object, being the face and the body of the Logos. Created in regard to its effect and transient nature as seen in each subject, that is, the garment of the Logos as mediated by the soul to the body. For if the soul is mediating, then we cannot but speak of the light emanating from the body as a created overflow from the intuitive sight of the soul. But since the lesser is named by the better, and the better not by the lesser, according to Maximus's principles when speaking of Melchizedek, then one would not be entirely wrong to summarize the experience as the uncreated light of Mount Tabor. Thank you all for watching this episode of Mount Athos and Aquinas Fellowship. Stay tuned for our next episode where we will be discussing Aquinas and Maximus' threefold distinction between being, well-being, and eternal well-being. Until then, God bless.